Afternoon. Welcome you back once again to the North Carolina State University Arboretum to take a look at another group of plants here in our collections. Today we're going to talk about crepe myrtles, certainly one of the most popular and favorite plants in the southeastern United States. It's so popular, so widely grown that some people even think perhaps it's native to this area, but in reality it's one of the first widespread introductions that came in from abroad. The crepe myrtles are native to southeastern Asia and China. There are some 50 different species, but most of those are subtropical and they won't grow in our climates here in this area. So the one that became popular and has been the most widely used up until the present time is a plant that scientifically is known as Lagerstroemia indica. And the indica part of it, that comes from the fact that the early discoverers first found it in India, but it actually was a cultivated plant there and had been imported earlier from China, where it was very popular, and the Chinese have been growing it for some 1,500 years in their gardens and have loved it very much all through that time. So this species that we ended up with, the indica, which is the hardiest of these, or the one that we use the most, has a fair color range, and you see all kinds of colors as you go through the landscape. I've walked through our collection and pulled off just a few branches here to just show some of the diversity that does exist at this point within Lagerstroemia indica. It goes from white, although the whites tend to be perhaps less hardy than some of the other types. That fades into a very pale lavender. Then you go through various shades of lavenders into actually a deep purple. Then you can come into some of the shell pinks, the dark pinks, the roses, and into reddish shades, although I think there's not really a true bright red crepe myrtle, although the hybridizers keep working on this. You might also notice that just this handful of flowers that I have here show you that, like azaleas, not all crepe myrtles will go together with each other. You can get some really garish combinations of colors that clash badly. So when a person is buying these, it's a good idea to check them out in midsummer when they're in bloom, if possible. Particularly if you have a brick house, certain colors of red brick may not go with certain colors of red crepe myrtle. In the Arboretum, which you will be seeing various pictures of or shots of here, we have over 50 different varieties planted all together. And with that much of a mixture, that many different kinds, actually the colors work pretty well there. There's just such an overall mosaic or blend of these materials. Over the years, the hybridizers have looked primarily for color as their primary feature, a little bit on flower size toward the larger flowers if at all possible. But one of the things that we did lack through that time period that showed up particularly dramatically in recent years has been winter hardiness. And as many people will know, the winters of '84 and '85 were quite devastating, and some of our crepe myrtles were actually killed to the ground in those 100-year record freezes that we had. So there has been more recently a greater concern on hardiness. Now, luckily, we have a source of germplasm within the crepe myrtles that gives us this hardiness. On a very rare species, which you see here, called Lagerstroemia faurii. This crepe myrtle is very rare, even in the wild, and was discovered by scientists in northern Japan in the 1950s. And Dr. Creech from the National Arboretum and Longwood Gardens made an expedition there specifically to get the plant that you see here in our gardens. And at that point, one of those plants was brought back somehow here to North Carolina, and we now have probably the largest specimen of it in the United States. If you take a look in this close-up of the bark of this tree, you'll see one of the strong pluses that it has. And although the regular crepe myrtle has attractive bark, this species brings in a trait of having a bright cinnamon red all the way into almost a black red color on the bark when the bark flakes off in the summertime. This stays through the summer and into the winter months. And I think this is a very nice characteristic in that crepe myrtles do bloom for a long period, but you see the plant year-round. And so if the trunks are more attractive, then you have year-round beauty in that way. So that was one feature that Lagerstroemia faurii brought in. Another was indeed much greater hardiness than existed in any of the others. Its one major flaw, however, was the fact that the flower heads were smaller and not as showy. So over the last 20 years, scientists at the National Arboretum have been working with these two species, hybridizing them, trying to bring in the beautiful red bark. Another feature that I didn't mention was the fact that it is totally resistant to powdery mildew, which is a major problem in a lot of southern gardens. and to bring the greater flower range in. So they come back and forth, using the flower colors of the indica, the hardiness of the bark, and the disease resistance of the Farii. And in recent years, a number of these varieties have been released into the market, and they again take a little more searching out to find them, but they're superb landscape plants for people to use in this state. And we'll take a look at several of these that are now blooming and growing in our collections here. Probably the best one in terms of coming into the red shades of colors is one called Tuscarora, which you see here. It again is very vigorous growing, and in our very cold winter it was one of the few reds that actually stayed alive through the winter and didn't get killed back to the ground. It's vigorous growing, very large panicles, very, very nice, and it will have that reddish bark as well. Probably the one that's most widely being grown, you see here in another shot, these plants are the Natchez crepe myrtle. It has the good white flowers, the red bark, and again, fast growing and being sold by a lot of nurserymen. Another one that we'll take a look at here is Muskogee. This has a light purple bloom, a very vigorous growing plant. In 7 years, ours has reached a height of almost 20 feet in the garden. And again, very hardy. We had no winter injury on it, even in our record low back in the past. So these and some other varieties that are coming into the picture have greatly improved our range of what we're getting from our crepe myrtles today. Now, there are other kinds of possibilities. A range that came in back in the 1960s when seed company hybridizers were working with trying to grow some woody ornamentals from seed. They came up with a group of crepe myrtles known as the Crepe Myrtlettes. And whereas normally you'll go out and buy a plant of a crepe myrtle, anywhere from say a 1-gallon can all the way up to a 20-foot specimen balled in burlap, crepe myrtlettes can be grown from seed. And most of the major seed companies have these available. You can buy them out of catalogs. And one of the things about the crepe myrtlettes is that they will bloom the first year from seed as very small plants. We'll take a look at one here that you'll see. This one about knee-high and with the reddish-pink flowers on it. One of the problems with crepe myrtlettes is that you don't always know what color you're going to get, because out of a seed packet you can get a wide array of materials. But again, planted in mass, the mixture looks good and they work very well. Now, one thing that I would mention about these crepe myrtlettes, however, is that they are sold as dwarf crepe myrtles. And like the term on many other plants, dwarf is sometimes misused. Dwarf conifers as an example. In most cases, what people really mean are slow-growing materials. They grow slower, but eventually they will get just as big as some of the others. And in this shot that you'll see here, this is a crepe myrtleette at about 15 years of age and about 12 feet high. So they can eventually get up into some size. Now, again, the hybridizers continue to work on this, and one of the exciting things that's coming along that you'll be seeing in the gardens in North Carolina probably in about 5 years is a group of true dwarfs that are being developed down in the Texas area at this point. I saw these plants the first time about a month ago, and I was extremely excited about them and tried to get cuttings to bring back to our collections. But they're so new and so potentially valuable, I wasn't able to get the company to give us any of these because they had just paid the hybridizer over $100,000 for the rights to propagate them, and they wanted to make sure that no one else got them out until they did. But these are going to be true dwarf crepe myrtles. They sort of have almost horizontal branches. They will probably have an ultimate height of 10 inches. They come in a wide variety of colors, and they're going to make excellent ground covers in the future. So that's something we can look forward to about 1990 to 1995 coming into our marketplace. We also are learning about other ways of using crepe myrtles. As you get into the western parts of the North Carolina where hardiness does become a major problem, we're finding that you can use them almost like herbaceous perennials. The roots are totally hardy even if the tops get frozen down. And crepe myrtles do bloom on new wood each season. So you can actually cut a crepe myrtle to the ground every year and still get a good flower display in that summer. A friend of mine that works at the Chicago Botanic Garden has found that actually they're doing pretty well with crepe myrtles in Chicago, which is an amazing thing indeed. Again, each winter they shear them to the ground, they mulch them heavily, and they get a beautiful summer display. So maybe some of our viewers that are in the colder areas of the state that want to use crepe myrtles and have given up on them might want to try that technique to see what they can do. Again, as you've seen, there is an enormous variety in terms of size, bark color, habit, flower color. So it's an exciting plant that we can use in many, many ways in our landscapes. It is certainly one of our best southern plants in that it has very, very few pest problems. It's again, a plant that can last for hundreds of years in the landscape. In fact, the largest crepe myrtles in existence in the United States now are located down in Georgia at this point. They have a height of 45 feet with a trunk some 7 feet in diameter as the largest recorded crepe myrtle in this country. So from tiny dwarfs to gigantic plants, they are a true part of our southern life and a great landscape plant for us to use.